Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, June 26th edition of the MMAOB Daily Show. I'm your host, as always, Adam Martin. Going to be taking you through the latest in the world of mixed martial arts. First and foremost, guys, follow me on Twitter at MMAdamMartin. This podcast is available at MMAOddsbreaker.com and on our YouTube channel. Please like, share, subscribe, spread the word, guys. I'd appreciate that. Also, check me out at SureDog.com, BJPenny.com, MMAnews.com, and MMARatings.net. Some internet problems, but they're all fixed now, so things should be good to go. I also want to say that about 12 o'clock today, me and Cole Shelton will be doing the full preview for the UFC Minneapolis card, so definitely be on the lookout for that. Again, MMAOddsbreaker.com and on our YouTube channel as well, so check that out if you guys want to watch the preview for that card. A lot to talk about today. I want to break down last night's Contender series, or recap it, I should say, and then there's a bunch of fight announcements to get to, so I'm just going to get right into the Contender series. I watched it this morning. I wasn't able to watch it last night. It was a long card, so I had to get through it when I had more time this morning. 5 decisions. So typically there are a lot of finishes on the show. Last night was not one of those cards. 5 decisions. Decent fights, though, for sure. But 5 fights that went the distance. Dana White did award 2 contracts. I'll just talk about the fights right now and about the contracts. Main event of the evening, Tony Johnson wins a unanimous decision over Alton Cunningham. Tony Johnson was the lone underdog on the card to cash. He was actually a plus 450 underdog. So he was a huge dog. I talked to him yesterday on the podcast. Again, a lot of respect for this guy. He's been around the sport for a long time. Made his debut in 2007, fought in Strikeforce in 2008. As Lauren Sanko talked about on the show, this guy slept in his car to make ends meet. So a lot of respect for this guy. 37 years old. He's an older guy. Went on the show. Won a decision. A surprising decision, I'd say. A surprisingly unanimous decision, I wanted to say. 29-28 across the board. I'm not saying it's the wrong call by any means. I think, if anything, it's a good decision because Cunningham just pressed this guy against the fence, did really nothing. Johnson landed some good shots in the first round. Wasn't able to get the finish, but kept pushing through the whole fight. But Cunningham was pressing him against the fence. We've seen many times in the past the guys pushing the guy against the fence got the decision. Michael Bisping commentated this fight, and he was like, "Oh man, where were the judges when I fought Chael Sonnen? When he fought Chael pushed me against the fence for 3 rounds, and Michael landed better strikes along the fence and lost the decision." So it is what it is. Different sets of judges, different eyes. They saw the decision differently. I'm okay with the decision with Tony Johnson winning. Again, Cunningham really didn't do much in this fight, but I have to be honest, I did think he was going to win the fight. So good for the judges to actually score a fight for the guy being pressed but doing more damage. I just feel bad for Johnson. He didn't get a contract. I think they could have given him one. At the same time, an older guy, he is a bit small for that division. The fact he was pressing against that cage for so long does concern me a bit. Also, his cardio was an issue. He even talked about that later on when he was being interviewed in the post-fight. Said his cardio was a problem in his training camp, and it showed up in the fight. Managed to get the decision, cashes a plus 450 dog, but did not get a contract. Not sure where Johnson goes from here. I mean, he has fought in Bellator as well. Maybe he goes back to Bellator. Maybe the UFC gives him a call on short notice in the future. I'm not too sure. It was a gritty performance. I think they could have given him a contract, but I don't think it's the end of the world he didn't. So I feel bad for the guy. Again, he's been around the sport for a long time. This was probably his last chance. But again, who knows what happens in the future? Maybe a short notice fight opens up. Maybe Bellator calls again. Maybe PFL calls. Maybe one calls or Bison or something. I think we'll see this guy fight again. I'm just not sure when and where. Next up, we had Justin Gonzalez take on Zach Lane. This was a featherweight bout. Gonzalez with a mostly dominant win here over, Zach Zane, I should say. Gonzalez with a mostly dominant performance, winning a decision, but did not get a contract. White called him one-dimensional, mostly because he was grappling this fight. I don't know. I mean, I think you could have given him a contract, but he didn't get the finish, and I think he could have got the finish. This guy, Zane, was extremely tired. He just looked like a fallen, beat-up fighter in this fight. But Gonzalez did not get the finish, didn't get the contract. I think we'll see him back. He's a young guy. They have to bring him back, I think, for another fight in the Contender Series, give him another chance. That'd be my guess. But who knows? Maybe another organization saw this fight, saw what they liked. He'll get signed. I think they could have taken him, but they chose not to. I don't think it's the end of the world, especially in a stacked featherweight division. He needed to get the finish. He didn't get it. And for Zane, yikes, not a good performance. Very, very poor performance. He needs to get back to the drawing board. Next up, middleweight bout, Kyle Daukaus against Michael Lombardo. Daukaus did not get a contract, but he won a unanimous decision, a very lopsided unanimous decision. And, again, Dana White praised him in the fight, in the post-fight interview with Lorosenko and said that, he liked his game, well-rounded, was looking for the finish, the submission the whole time, but didn't get it. And I think that's why he didn't get the contract, just because he didn't get that finish over a guy that was being beat up for the most part. I mean, this was a very lopsided fight. I think you could have given the decision to the contract to Kyle Daukaus. It is what it is. Definitely got to bring this guy back for another fight. If not, another promotion will probably sign him. He did mention that this guy wants to drop to 170 in the future. He was, I think, a bit small for 185. Still dominated this fight, though. So, again, it's like Gonzalez. I think they could have given either of these guys a contract. They chose not to give either of them one. It is what it is. Didn't get a finish. I mean, you kind of got to get a finish to guarantee yourself a contract on this show. And these guys went to decision, and that's the risk you take. Next up, Miles John with probably the best performance of the night, winning a lopsided, again, unanimous decision over Richie Santiago. A lot of decisions on this card. This was another one of them. But I think this guy, of all the fighters on the card, 100% he was the guy to take. Very well-rounded game. It looked like a guy who could fight in the UFC right now. So Miles John was a great pickup by the UFC, a very obvious pickup, if anything. Former LFA champion. He was going to make it to the UFC either way. He just had to get in the hard way by fighting on the Contender Series. Fought a very overmatched opponent here in Richie Santiago. Won a very, very lopsided decision again. I like this guy's game. Good wrestling, good striking. Just everything about him is really good. So he's going to fit in well in the UFC in that bantamweight division. I like the signing a lot. No-brainer here for Dana White. And then opening up the card, we had a catchweight bout, 178 pounds between Miguel Baeza and Victor Reina. For my mind, this is probably the fight of the night. Great fight. Both guys really went at it for 3 rounds. And Miguel Baeza wins a unanimous decision, 29-28. He won the first 2 rounds, kind of gassed out a bit, and Reina took over the third. But Dana White was really impressed by the fight and gave Baeza a contract. This is the one that's going to cause some controversy because it wasn't as dominant of a win as the other guys like Gonzalez and Daukaus. But for my money, this was probably the best fight of the night. So Dana White, Sean Shelby, Mick Mayer, they were standing on their feet, cheering and clapping at them in this one. I really enjoyed this fight a lot. And I think Baeza, he's good. He definitely is good. He's got a lot of holes in his game. He's got to work on his cardio for sure, his conditioning, his takedown defense, but his striking's good. And the guy was going for the finish the entire 15 minutes, which I really respect too. So Dana White obviously saw that, gave him the contract. This will be some controversy because you look at a guy like Brendan Lofton last week, didn't get the deal. Like, what was the difference really? I mean, that was an even better fight if anything, didn't get the deal. So there's going to be some controversy there, but I don't hate this contract. I don't love it. I don't hate it either. It was a good fight. I personally would have told the guy come back for another fight, but you know what? Good for him. You guys deal in the UFC, and now the UFC's 170 pounds division got another good fighter in it. And I will say this. I think the fact that he took the fight despite his opponent missing weight by 8 pounds or 7 pounds, that was another reason the UFC was like, hey, you know what? This guy wanted to fight. He wants to be here. He's taking on a guy that's a lot bigger than him on short notice. Bring him in the UFC. So, again, Miguel Baeza and Miles Johns win the contracts to the UFC. Overall, I mean, there were some okay fights, but definitely not the best Contender Series we've seen much better. And hopefully next week there's some more finishes because – let's be honest here. That's what the UFC wants to see. They want to see guys go in there and knock people out. Look at Yorgan De Castro last week. Knocks the guy out, gets the contract. So of the 2 cards now, I think there's been 1 finish. That's going to change soon. And I think it will next week. I think we'll see some knockouts or some submissions next week. All right, what else? There's a lot of fight announcements to talk about here, guys, so I'm going to get right into them. UFC Vancouver, actually, they announced a couple fights for this yesterday. So I'm not going to talk about the fights that we've already got into, but in previous editions of the show, like for instance, Uriah Hall and Antonio Carlos Jr., we already knew that fight was happening, but there's some new fights here, including Glover Teixeira taking on Nikita Krylov, which I like a lot. This is a good fight. Glover Teixeira, 29-7 record, coming off back-to-back wins over Ilir Latifi and Carl Robertson, also beat Misha Serkinov, mixed in with a decision loss to Corey Anderson, and Nikita Krylov coming off a really big rear naked choke win over OSP. He's won 5 of his last 6 fights. Glover Teixeira is being used as a gatekeeper once again, taking on a guy in Krylov who's looked really good, especially in his last fight. He had still that loss to Blachowicz, and that concerns me. I mean, it was an arm triangle choke submission loss. He also been submitted by a guillotine to Misha Serkinov. He's got a lot of submission losses, actually 5 in his record. And Glover Teixeira has 8 wins by submission, including his last 2 fights. The guy's an absolute beast on the ground. He is an older guy, 39. I still think Glover wins this fight, though. I mean, I like the matchup a lot, actually, for Glover. It's just another fight where the UFC's thinking, hey, maybe this is the time he's going to, fade. I don't think it is. I think Glover's probably going to win. I would definitely make him a favorite, although I do think there will be some respect shown to Krylov, especially after beating OSP in his last fight. And then here's another good fight. Todd Duffee's returning to the cage. So I was a little surprised by this. I mean, we had heard some rumors that Todd Duffee was making a return. He's been doing some more interviews as of late, but still surprising to see him come back. Age 33 now, hasn't fought since 2015 against Frank Mir when he got brutally knocked out. His last win in 2014 to Anthony Hamilton. So he hasn't fought in a long time. Coming back and fighting Jeff Hughes here. Jeff Hughes had a disappointing UFC debut against Maurice Green, losing a split decision, but had won 4 straight fights, 31 years old. So I'm not a young guy himself. They're both well, Duffee's a little older, but still about the same age in reality of things. Another tough fight to call. I mean, Todd Duffee has a lot of KO power, but he's also been knocked out a bunch of times, and he hasn't fought in 4 years. That's a long layoff. Hughes, didn't look good against Green in his debut, but we've seen him look pretty good in the past. I think you have to fear Hughes just based on the fact that Duffee hasn't fought since 2015. That's a long time ago. I mean, I actually remember that fight very well because I had Todd Duffee in that fight, and he got brutally knocked out, and I was like, wow, are you serious? Like, that was actually a good night for me. I remember I had Holly Holm over Renault, and I had Ferguson over Josh Thompson. So that's how long ago that card was. It's been a while. I love Todd Duffee, great fight, great guy, and at times a great fighter, but that chin does concern me. And we'll see what happens here. But again, the layoff too, scary stuff. So I think Hughes will probably be favored, but we'll see what happens there. UFC fight at 155 in Sacramento. There was an injury to Martin Day. Now Benito Lopez will be fighting Vince Morales. So Benito Lopez here, 9-1 record, only 25 years old, young guy. Lost to Manny Bermudez in his last fight. Before that, he beaten Albert Morales. He got into the UFC with the win over Steven Peterson on the first season of the Contender Series. Now he's taking on Vince Morales. Vince Morales coming off of a win, I believe, over Aiden Zahabi. Let me double check that. Yes, over Aiden Zahabi. 1-1 the UFC. Also lost to Yadong Song. You got to go with Benito Lopez in this fight. The fact that Morales is taking on short notice concerns me, but Lopez, local California guy. This fight's in Sacramento. Younger guy, better prospect in my opinion. I would definitely favor Benito Lopez in this one. All right, and then UFC Newark. So that's the card with Colby Covington versus Robbie Lawler. And go check out James's interview with Dan Lambert. He talks more about just the thought process behind them taking that fight. It seems like the UFC forced their hand, said, you got to take this fight. So that's, people were wondering, why did Colby take the fight? He had to. And he has to win if he wants to get that title shot. And, he's going to kind of have to hope that Ben Askren and Jorge Masvidal have a bad fight or something, because he's in a bad spot right now. I mean, the guy has been screwed out of a title shot, no doubt about it. I'm not 100% sure if going into that casino and filming Dana White helped his cause, to be honest. First Dana White was like, oh, we're cool and stuff. But, looking back now a couple months later, it's like, was that the right decision by Colby? I'm not 100% sure. So anyways, UFC Newark, they added some couple of fights to it. Let's go through them. Antonina Shevchenko taking on Lucie Pudilova. So Antonina Shevchenko, let's pull her out. Antonina Shevchenko, she is 7-1, lost to Roxanne Modafferi in the last fight, also beat Ji Yeon Kim in her UFC debut. That fight against Modafferi was very, very poor performance by her, taken down by a fighter that's pretty shop-worn. I don't know. That really soured me on her. Taking on Pudilova here, 25 years old, and she's only 2-3 in the UFC, but her losses are really close losses. Could have won those fights. Very scrappy young fighter. Matchup-wise, it's a good fight for Shevchenko because she's probably the better striker, but she's also 9 years older. And if Pudilova can get a takedown, she's probably going to beat Shevchenko. It's kind of funny, though. I was going to say that Pudilova's nickname is Bullet, and we also know that Antonina's sister's nickname is Bullet, too. So maybe she wants to take back that Bullet nickname. I think Shevchenko will be favored once again, like she was in the last couple of fights, but I'm kind of sour on her after that loss, so I'd be very worried about putting any significant amount of money on her coming off that poor performance against Roxanne Modafferi. Next up, we got Trevin Giles taking on Gerald Meerschaert. I love this fight. Great fight. Trevin Giles, 11-1. He had beaten James Brockovich and Antonio Braganetto in his first 2 UFC fights. Came back recently and lost to Zach Cummings by submission after a 2-year layoff. So disappointing performance there against a guy like Cummings. But again, coming off a long layoff, I guess that was kind of expected in a way. Taking on Gerald Meerschaert here, who I think is one of the most underrated guys in that division. Gerald Meerschaert, pulling him out. He's been around a long time, fought a lot, 28-11 record. He has a 4-3 record in the UFC, but coming off back-to-back losses against Jack Hermanson and Kevin Holland. The loss to Hermanson, that's not a bad loss. He also lost to Thiago Santos, again, not a bad loss. But the Holland fight, he probably should have won that fight, to be fair, but it wasn't a great performance by him. And he's going to have to need this win if he wants to stick on the UFC. I personally would hope he stays around even with the loss, because this guy's always in good fights. Like, win or lose, he's in good fights, but we'll see what happens. I think the odds will be closer to this one, but I would assume people will be fading Gerald Meerschaert and not giving the respect he deserves, like he usually never gets. Next up, Darko Stosic taking on Kennedy and Nzechukwu. Darko Stosic, he has a 13-2 record. He's 1-1 in the UFC. He beat Jeremy Kimball in his debut and then lost to Devin Clark a couple months ago. Or actually, it was actually earlier this month. So he's taking a very quick turnaround. The fight with Clark was not a good performance by him. I was disappointed there. I thought he should have won that fight, but he didn't. And now he's taking on Kennedy Nzechukwu, who's coming off of another He's coming off a bad loss here to Paul Craig, where he was winning the entire fight and then got submitted late in the third round. Before that, had been undefeated in his career. A lot of knockout power. Interesting fight. I mean, good matchmaking here. Two prospects that need to get a win. I personally favored Stosic a little bit, but you know what? If Nzechukwu wins, it wouldn't surprise me either. Two guys that you got to be careful of because their cardio is very concerning as well as their ground games. Next up, it's Zelim Imadaev versus Salim Touahri. So Zelim Imadaev, he's coming off I think he was Max Griffin. Yep, Max Griffin, majority decision loss. Before that, had won all his fights by knockout. So he's a good prospect. He had a tough fight in his debut against Max Griffin. He's a really underrated fighter. Now taking on Salim Touahri. Salim Touahri, pulling out him right now. The Grizzly, that's what they call him. 0-2 in the UFC, losses to Warley Alves and Nikita Nakamura. The Nakamura fight was close, lost it though. I think you got to go with Imadaev if you're a younger guy, more knockout power. He had a close fight. Max Griffin could have won either way. I think I would definitely favor him here. And finally, for that card, we have a rebooking of Ilir Latifi versus Volkan Oezdemir. That fight was supposed to happen earlier this month. It got canceled at the last second. Now it's going to be rebooked. Volkan ended up closing, I think, as a slight favorite, or before the fight was pulled, I should say. I would expect that to be the case again, especially with Latifi having been the one who was injured. But that's definitely a good matchup, and I'm glad the UFC was able to rebook that fight in quick fashion. So I think that's all I want to talk about here, guys, as far as new fight announcements. Again, that UFC Newark card, it's pretty much it's pretty much done. I think it's got 12 fights on it now. So again, I've talked about a lot of these fights in the past. I'll just go through it really quickly. Colby Covington versus Robbie Lawler main event. Co-main, Oezdemir versus Latifi. Also on the main card, Jim Miller versus Clay Guida. Joaquin Silva versus Nasrat Hakparas, which I talked about. Jordan Espinoza versus Matt Schnell, which I've talked about. Lauren Murphy versus Mero Romero Varela, which I've spoken about in the past. Also, Shevchenko versus Pudilova, I just talked about that. Giles versus Meerschaert, Stosic versus Nzechukwu. In the past, I've talked about Ramazan Amid versus Claudio Silva. I like that fight a lot. And then in the last week, I've talked about today, Imadaev versus Touahri, and Holtzman versus Dong Young Kim Jr., the little Dong Young Kim, the other Dong Young Kim, Dong Young Ma, they call him the maestro. By the way, that card starts at 12 p.m., so awesome. I mean, I love it. It's great. Leaves us all be able to cover the sport with it Saturday off. So I'm really looking forward to that. I would hope in the future they do more of these early cards, but we'll see what happens. Anyways, guys, I think that's all I want to talk about today. So again, follow me on Twitter at MMAOB. Follow this podcast at MMAOddsbreaker.com, and on our YouTube channel, please like, share, and subscribe. Like I mentioned earlier, myself and Cole Shelton will be doing a podcast breaking down UFC Minneapolis around noon today. So definitely stay tuned to the channel and check that out. SureDog.com, Insane Prop Bets, and Beating the Books are both up. I'm sending in my prime picks today, so check that out as well. Also at MMAOddsbreaker.com, I should mention I have my opening odds breakdown for the UFC Minneapolis card. So if you can't wait an hour to check out the podcast, go and check the article out. What else? MMAnews.com, MMAratings.net, and BJPen.com. A bunch of articles coming out in the next couple of days there as well. So check all that stuff out, guys. I appreciate the support as always, and I'll be back in a little bit to break down UFC Minneapolis. Until then, have a great morning, guys. Enjoy your coffee, enjoy your donuts, or whatever else you're going to do, a sandwich, whatever. Get ready for the podcast breaking down UFC Minneapolis. Until then, have an awesome day.